people in life are looking at how do I make a life worth living and a retirement worth having. The challenge of people who work their whole lives not really planning out their lives, just living out their lives. They fall in love with someone who is either right or wrong for them. They produce children who either become right or wrong in the world. And they do that because they don't take time to read books on parenting. They do things their own way. They do things based on how their parents did them before, or perhaps they do them harsher and worse than maybe they learned back then. In life, we have to know what's what and who's who. What is what the Lord God produces in the heart, soul, and mind. Who is who belongs to you and your family of choice, not mine. In the life of a man, he has the right to leave his father's house and go out into the community and find someone who is right for his soul. Someone who is right for your soul raises you up and never drags you down. Someone who is right for your soul knows how to care for you and love you until you're in the ground. Someone who knows the Lord is usually best for other people. The challenge is that today so many people have forgotten who the Lord is and should be in every way. The life of a man is his own is true. We all have free will, and we can know what to do by keeping our own countenance. But what we learn from the ancient texts that have talked about God and have brought his history and lineage into the world even today, a millennium later per se, is that the Lord God above makes all heaven and earth and everything within it. So when Christians and Muslims and other types of Wiccans and pagans even try to say that God didn't make something because they only believe in a biological cell-based world, they fail to recognize that those things simply go back into the earth at the end of a life. They are either cremated to keep a sanitary world, or they are simply buried in a casket of any shape and size. And most people who are trying to do something for their family lineage do not pick fancy things to be put into the ground. It's foolishness. My late father decided to literally be buried in almost a colorful cardboard box because he decided to be cremated in order to allow his remains to remain, in the earth. Overseas, people who don't have burial grounds, people who I care about who have left the world of mine, have to have a Oaxaca. But if they don't have an Oaxaca, they might be cremated and allowed to drift off in the wind. There are plenty of different rituals and ceremonies, and one of the crazy things I learned about in Japan is once they are cremated, the family is expected to pick up the bone fragments and other parts of the ashes that they watch during the demise and put it in an urn. And that urn literally sits in the family temple or in the family shrine, or especially on a shelf that's very high towards the sky in the house. And on Obon, which is happening generally around October, we celebrate the deaths and lives of those people, those ancestors, who tend to come back. And when we do that, we put special foods out, we put special rites out, we carefully put our chopstick in only a special way that only fools of America do today, meaning over here that don't know what that means in front of a Japanese person. But openly, this is the way we handle it. And on the New Year's Eve, we go to the temples and we wake the dead by ringing bells and clapping our hands. And on New Year's Day, we dress up in our best Sunday best and we go to the shrine. And we really put ourselves to the test. We put forward our wishes for the new year, what we might be calling here as New Year's resolutions. But every culture in every part of the world handles death a little differently. The sad part about America is because families have become so disjointed, because workforces have begun to move across the nation, across the land, following their own dreams, if you will, is that our elderly care is not being handled well. It's not being handled well because we have people who are blacks and whites and other people of impoverished minds who just think that person's heirlooms are theirs to find. What a lie they've told themselves. What a lot of people don't understand is that the Lord God above gifts a man, or gifts a woman, and gifts a matron or a patron of a family. What that means is that the Lord God plans a life and steers a life, and if that Lord is honored and revered all of that man's life, then his retirement really is, well, as they say, out of this world. But at the same time, he may have heritage, he may have lineage, he may have legacy to bequeath to his children. And those children carry that money, those gifts, those items, those heirlooms, those things that have been passed down from generation to generation into their own family lineage. And that's how history is written in the world. A person's legacy is what they do to change the world for the better. A person's heritage is what they have learned from the past and all the fighters that came forward since the Mayflower to last. The problem in the world today, especially in certain impoverished communities, is that people are killing one another today. They are ridiculously taking over lives and pretending that God's okay with it, and yet they don't recognize God's despise. You see, in the world today, killing is an immoral act. Only when our military needs to do so do we do that and take that act. But most military leaders are of Christendom is not true. But most military leaders in the world are not always through killing you. In the life of different nations, they have completely stepped away in some places, completely due to poverty and other stupid lineages from God. God is not pleased with that today. My encouragement today is for you to take a look at your own heritage. Your own heritage is basically whether you're a part of a black community, whether you're part of an Asian community, whether you're a part of an Indian community, whether you're part of a native Indian community, whether you're part of a European community, or whether your lineage goes further back in time. We have to understand where we came from is not always thine. What I mean by that is that how did you get to your certain level of freedom in this world? Where did your heritage come from? How did the hardships affect your lineage? How many people died fighting for your rights? How many people lived in order for you to live? You see, people forget these things, and yet the entire earth is for the spiritual realm, the unseen, the unforeseen. And people want to forget that too until somebody dies. And then they get reminded of the preciousness of life. The molesters of our land are here. And sadly they're here because governments failed to recognize those people, to recognize those lands and how they're training their young people. You see, people overseas have been trained to hate America. They've also been trained to despise America, and many of them are jealous of American life. But as my late spouse discovered, America is not all it's been cracked up to be. It's not all that's been touted, you see. It's not always the PR they see in movies that are imported into their land. And what it is still America in struggle. It is still a matter of families who are trying to double their income. But in life we have to provide for ourselves, our families, our man, our children, our pets, and our wealth. But the only way to do that, the only honorable way to do that is to work your ass off and earn it. Anything you take, anything that you don't make, and anything that you have on the take is not going to provide for you a life. I'm always amazed at how impoverished people tell me they don't understand why they're still struggling in poverty. I'm like, well, I could tell you that, but you're not going to like it. You see, the rebuke of the Lord is so far removed from America today and American society today that even pastors stay away from that topic. And they stay away from that topic probably problematically because it won't make them popular in their church houses. On the other hand, we have arrogant pastors like at Willow Creek who literally would spend 3 years at a time telling his congregation that they're sinners while he was touting and blowing his own horn. But I know that because the woman I love attended that church, and I literally was trying to figure out what the hell is going on in this person's soul, that this is coming about like this. And as an outsider listening in, I couldn't believe the sin that I heard in churches across the world. I also get tired of pastors who write incredibly well-written, industrious sermons, and they never provide a conclusion or a takeaway for their congregations. And yet they can tout 16 paid on-staff pastors. And I think, wow, your church is that large, and yet you can't provide people the takeaways for the week. So while people may see me as meek, while I know that my body is growing weak from the attacks on my life by bastard satanic sheriff and other total strangers that thought they'd just impact negatively and immorally, illicitly, and illegally a human being's life, I want to remind you today that you are not made of your own accord. Your parents might have gotten together, had a little bit of fun time with each other, but you came out of, well, an earthly measure. And you are benefiting from that to a point. But God breathed the soul of you into that life form. And however you got out of there with your genetics, with your cellular health, is totally up to God to a point. But human beings then make choices. They make distributions, if you will, of their ideologies on life. And all I can encourage you to do as a pagan pastor is to first find a faith that's right from you. And the faith that is right for a human being never involves the killing of another human's life or soul. Then I encourage you to find a family of choice. The people that love you the most for your soul, recognizes your frailties without spilling them all over the earth in gossip, and openly have a desire to ensure that your family continues to thrive and not die. Beyond that, of course, you have your fitness, of which your job is to take care of the temple house that the Lord provides you. If there's a birth defect, then we all have the right to pursue it with specialists, not generalists, and not arrogant people about God's house. At the present time in America, we have a lot of religious organizations, especially Catholics, that have always been a part of healing America, but they are now bastardizing the American way, and that they're trying to put their beliefs and their lineages and their philosophies into the medical rights of people. That is a lie they're telling themselves, because the Lord God obviously makes all people, and the Lord God is most powerful enough that he can destroy a people. This time of pandemic and epidemic should be reminding you of your mortality rate and reminding you of how important it is to take care of your temple, your body, of your soul that provides itself to the earth. Once you die, your soul goes to God. Of course, there's finances, and finances come about pretty simply in a child's mind. If the child is never required to earn a living or do errands or chores for a family, they never learn how to serve. And all children in this world must learn how to serve without being, well, turned into slaves. The enslavement of children is still happening today. Parents are lazy as hell. They go out, they have sex, they fuck, they do drugs, whatever. Then they produce a child, and then they realize how fucking expensive a child can be. No offense, but it's not cheap to have a baby in a hospital, is it? There's a bill that comes with that. And no offense, but it's not cheap to have diapers and whatnot, to have to handle a child's all through adult life. God bless the good wills of America, because if it's in the right kind of community, if it's in the right kind of loving community, you'll find the right size clothing at the right time of the child's life, and then you can return it back to the rest of the community, presuming the child hasn't worn it out. But our earth doesn't need all these fabrics put back in it. Outside of finances, it's pretty straightforward that a person has to plan their career. And when they get too involved with sex, drugs, and rock and roll, they often don't even think about their future. And what that creates is a marvelous retail environment, but the problem is there's not enough money in minimum wage to handle that. So we often get stuck in relationships that are not healthy for us. It can also happen to people who marvelously think someone is handsome and a marvelous perfect Ken doll to their Barbie doll effect, but the problem is that they're lying to themselves about whether or not that relationship will last. Now on top of this, we have other categories of friendship and fellowship, that we surround ourselves with a tribe, a team of people who will network for us or will help us to drive ourselves into the ground and die. You see, who you associate with in life, especially your significant other, matters to God. And a lot of women and a lot of men totally miss the signs from God about who they're supposed to partner with for the rest of their life. And as a result, those partnerships don't thrive. They don't last, and they often destroy families and extended families. But our fellowship in the world and our eventually philanthropy in the world impacts our lives. The fellowship we have opportunities right now to in the time of COVID may mainly be online. But there are plenty of meetup groups, there are plenty of non-for-profit groups, and there are plenty of professional organizations for your industry, for the technologies that are coming, and for any of the hobbies you have. But as you're walking through those situations, make sure you're paying attention to who's going to be good liaisons, because a lot of times people connect themselves with the wrong people they think are cool, and then they end up in difficulty and poverty and struggle and finding another fool in front of the Lord.